Hey guys, I hope everybody's doing well. For Q, I hope the men in white coats in your holiday, I hope that you're feeling better. Uh, hey Connie, it's good to see you. So, I've been eyeballs deep in this Gypsy Rose case, guys. If you're hearing an echo or whatever, just let me know because I'm on a different laptop than I usually use tonight. Farq says that Gypsy's little bird of prey eyes are dark. Sorry, I usually don't personally attack. No, I agree with you. Her and Nicholas both have a look to them. I'm actually going to share their picture right now. Let me go ahead and pull them up here. Oh, Loves Lark. Well, that's good that it sounds better than normal, probably because this is a more expensive laptop, I would say. Okay, let's see if I can bring up those bird of prey eyes as Farq said. There is Gypsy Rose and Nicholas Godejohn back in 2015. The eyes definitely have always stood out to me when it comes to these two. So what I've done is when I watched the Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose, correct me if I got that wrong, but it's her most recent interview. When I watched that, made me want to go back and dig some of the original articles and look for documents and things, which I hadn't had much luck with documents, just finding their original charges. But these original articles, it's just odd to read those because like this one talking about the search warrants, it's, you know, this is back when it all was happening and they're just finding out that Gypsy could walk and, you know, they're finding out that her and Nicholas were romantic, you know, just everything they thought they knew wasn't it. And this is including her family as well, her parent or her dad and her stepmom anyways. So that's kind of what I've been doing is digging this. There is a new podcast that she done out, and I thought that we would watch that together and kind of work in the new stuff that we learned from the Prison Confessions special that was on Lifetime. Did any of you guys watch that? Give me a second and I'll share my screen here and we'll just get started on the podcast. Take that down. And we'll stop and read some articles along the way too. I just don't want to start with those because they're not going to fit in very well. Oh, you didn't watch it, Connie? So there was some new information. One of the more shocking pieces of information I thought was that when I found out that Gypsy was scheduled to have another throat surgery in the near future as to when she planned to have her mother murdered and had Nick murder her. So, you know, that kind of made me switch my thinking from her being a cold-blooded killer to her, like, when I put myself in her shoes and I'm thinking that I'm a child that's been forced through surgery after surgery after surgery, and I know that there's another one coming up on my throat and I'm so scared, maybe she really thought that that was her only way out. And I'm not excusing her because there's lots of abused people in prison for the same thing that she done. It is called accessory to murder. And it's called sometimes murder. You know, a lot of people have gotten murder for the things that she's done. So I'm not giving her any excuses. I'm just saying that kind of geared my thinking or changed my thinking a little bit. Ha! Yeah, I know. I'm a terrible date. Anna loves to lurk. Hey, but we watched it. I still didn't get the last episode all the way in. I know. But this podcast is supposed to be really good. And I've watched like a little bit of it, and it is, so I'll have to start it over. But let's go ahead and start this.
Online courses offered by Padi Global helped me to grow in my career as well as it helped me to learn new management skills.
Different to protect yourself.
I started at Purdue Global because it was really easy to try to balance
Sorry,
classes,
guys, I'm too cheap to get YouTube
writing
Premium.
paper.
Or too broke one. I don't know which
those
one.
things, or also just like looking to laugh and hang out with your friends because we're your friends.
Or cry.
There's gonna be some crying. How much crying would you say?
I'm not a big crier, but I can make other people cry.
I love that.
Disrespectfully.
Respectfully.
Join our cult. I mean, community. I mean,
The coven.
religion.
Community. Community. Let's just stick with community.
Listen to
I'm
the
gonna
podcast.
skip on ahead to
Listen
Gypsy,
to
guys.
the podcast.
It's a new year, and that means new opportunities to make connections. But when it comes to dating, it can be tough to put yourself out there and know where to start. And that's why I'm excited to talk about.
Here we go.
You nervous at all?
No, I think I've been through so many interviews.
I'll get you back, Loves
right
the Lurk.
now.
Put me on a
It
payment
kinda.
plan.
Yeah.
Has it all
Whatever,
been
you know,
pretty much the
10%
same?
of that is
Everyone is-
bi-weekly.
It's semi. Good Morning America was actually the hardest.
Really?
Yeah, there was a lot of difficult questions in that, and we just came from The View, and I was like, oh my god, I hope these ladies are not mean to me. They were all very, very nice.
How can anyone be mean?
I'm
to you?
gonna be
I don't
interested
know.
to
I
see
mean,
that episode of The
I
View.
did some international interviews last night, and one of the questions was like, "How do you feel now that you're getting all this attention? But you're a murderer."
Oh my God.
So, like, she just flat out said it. It was a lady from the UK, and I'm kind of like, okay,
Oh.
and everybody in the room just like jumped up and was like ready to like, am I,
Fight.
fight or am I okay?
Yeah.
They were freaking out for me, and I'm like, no, guys, I got this. Like, it's something that I'm gonna have to address.
Yeah.
Because it's always in my comments. Like, why are we glorifying a murderer and this and that and the other? And I don't want to have to remind people every single time that I'm not the one that committed the act of the kill. So, I'm a part of it.
Right.
But in the state of Missouri, there's no such thing as accessory to murder. So technically,
they couldn't charge you.
they
for that.
couldn't charge me with accessory because that charge doesn't exist. So, I mean, had I been in another state,
You know, Loves the
I would have
Lurk,
been
you're
charged with
right.
accessory to commit murder.
Oh,
Interesting.
that makes sense.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Gypsy, welcome to the Vial Files.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We always start our conversations with kind of a heavy question, but fun. So I don't want to startle you. But
Okay.
Gypsy, how is your heart?
How is my heart?
Yeah.
My heart is very full.
Great.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to start by saying congratulations on being out.
Thank
We're
you.
so excited to be with you.
Thank you.
Such an incredible opportunity for us.
Mhm.
But truly, like, what has this been like for you since being released from prison?
It's been a little bit of a whirlwind for me. It's been 8.5 years since I actually seen the outside walls. So coming out, I think everyone was just so sweet, and seeing my family for the first time in a setting that we could be comfortable in, that is what fills my heart with such happiness.
That's awesome.
So I'm just trying to just take it day by day, not get overwhelmed.
So is that what you guys are thinking?
Leading
That her
up to
voice
you
is
being
part of her
released, what were
manipulation
those
tactic?
days like? Were
Mhm.
you nervous, excited?
Oh yeah.
What was it?
Well, it's funny because about a month before, I had not started feeling like it was real.
Mhm.
And then the day of that, it was like the day of being released, or the 24 hours leading up to it was when I really started to feel like, oh my God, there is a knot in my stomach right now. I am getting out tomorrow. And I felt like, okay, this is actually really happening because I've been prepping for it for so long. I actually got my notification that I was getting parole 2 years before my release date.
Oh,
So I had
wow.
2 years to
To like sit
prepare
on it.
to sit on it
Wow.
before it actually happened.
Was
So,
there any part of you that is excited
See,
as
I
I'm
didn't
sure
know
you
that
were to
it
be
took that
released?
Mhm.
long to
You know,
get
you
paroled.
spent
I didn't know they let
8.5
you know
years
that
there.
early.
Something I was so kind of captivated by watching your documentary
Mhm.
was you referencing that despite being in prison,
Mm.
it was your almost first taste of freedom. You
It
know,
really
the ability
was.
to make friends, to
Mhm.
do things for the first time. Was there any part of you that almost had any reluctancy to,
Does
leave
anyone
that
introduce
space and the
this up a little
friends,
bit?
as crazy as it might sound, being in
Yeah.
prison?
Mhm.
Was there any nerves?
Of course. I mean, I had built a life for myself. I call prison a world within a world because even though it's people have this misconception that prison is the same thing as a jail, and it's not. Actually, a jail is confined. It has cells. There's toilets in the room. But prison, you actually have a key to your room. Yeah, they keep it as much homey, I guess you could say, quote unquote homey, for inmates as possible. They have jobs in prison. They have activities. Actually, we even had a Super Bowl party last year. So, I mean, prison is a world in itself, and so it was hard leaving my friends behind because I have some friends that have some very lengthy sentences.
Mhm.
So the
You want to
last
give a shout out to any of them?
yeah, to Amelia Bird.
Okay.
You know, she actually has a very similar case to mine. And her case was, you know, featured on podcasts as well. So,
I
you
agree with
know,
that far.
I was very close with her because we had a lot in common. I say we
There's
both
lots
have
of
mommy
people
issues.
that's Houston
So,
lean on
didn't
each
commit
other.
that
yeah,
crime.
exactly, exactly.
I want to start with some light ones first before we really get into stuff.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
when you left prison, I think the internet first lost their mind. You had your Dr. Pepper ready to go.
Your 24 pack.
And I gotta
Bag of
say,
Snickers.
Nally and I were a couple of soda fans ourselves. My two favorite sodas, Coca-Cola,
Uh-huh.
Dr. Pepper.
Uh-huh.
She's a Diet Coke girl.
Oh.
I'm dying to know.
I like Dr. Pepper. Like
that's your drink.
that's my go-to. Dr.
Okay.
Pepper is my go-to, and it's actually my husband's go-to as well.
Okay.
So I'm telling you, match made in heaven.
I love that. Now, if Coca-Cola
That's
ever
too
approached
fast.
you
Let
and
me
said,
know,
Gypsy,
guys.
we want you to be the spokesperson. of
I'd have to
Coca-Cola."
turn them down because
You would.
I have to
That's
turn them
loyalty
down.
right there.
She is loyal.
Have you ever tried to mix Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper together?
That sounds terrible.
Gypsy, I'm telling you, you gotta try it. You gotta try it.
She hacked her
It's
leg up and
pretty
you
good.
found
Okay,
That's
okay,
good.
I'll try it.
Did
one
you-
time.
She thinks I'm crazy.
Did you see the Barbie movie?
I haven't, not
You
yet.
haven't
I
seen
want
Barbie.
to though.
You have to.
I'm a total girly girl. So.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
has been your best first?
When you write, your tone influences how readers respond. With Grammarly, just highlight your text and type how you want to sound.
Since being freed?
My best first. Oh my God. You know, there's been so many, but you know, cooking with my husband in the kitchen.
Okay.
I didn't know how to cook before. I still don't know how to cook now. But he's a great cook. So, you know, we were cooking in the kitchen and it was just a moment that we can, you know, spend together and just have some normalcy in our life right now.
But cooking's all about prepreration.
Is it?
Yeah, just gotta get the ingredients right.
Listen, Nick's the cook too. I have no idea what I'm doing. So it's what I can make is edible.
What,
So-
what was your favorite? What did you guys cook first? Like, what was the
It
first
was-
meal you made together?
Okay, so it was sauteed chicken
Yes,
and
and she had
corn
mixed
and
all
a
this,
pasta
and
dish,
she
like the Nor
filled.
pasta sides.
Okay.
And the funniest thing is, here he is telling me, like, pour the milk. It's a, you know, a half a cup of milk. I pour a cup and a half of milk, and he's like, no, pour it back in the jug. And I'm like, oh, this is horrible. I'm sorry, I don't know how to cook.
Okay. I mean, it's like, again, like cooking it's about being, in a way, especially when you're doing it, you know, it's a way of being connected. And
Yeah,
doing things
it is.
together.
It is.
can
It
be
was
fun.
great.
That is awesome. I think part of what fascinates me about your story is just the fact that for much of your life, you haven't been able to make choices for yourself.
Mhm.
You know, when you were going through the abuse from your mother,
Mhm.
you weren't able to make choices for yourself. And
Mhm.
like I said, prison itself, but even then you're limited to make choices. And now that you're free, I think the world is fascinated by
Mhm.
like, what are you watching? What do you
Right.
want to eat? Like, you know, like
Yeah.
what are the things that you're being gravitated to, you know, that you've maybe your whole life?
Okay, yeah, Loves the Lurk is giving some good information here. So for anybody that didn't see her prison confessions, these are some of the things that she talked about. She talked about planning the murder. She did let Nick in. She stole the knife from Walmart. She taped her house, walked through, you know, on video, made the stabbing motion at her mother's bed at the pillow. She mailed the weapon back to Wisconsin, where Nick was from. And of course, she cleaned up the mess. She does claim that Nick made her clean up the mess, but she did. Loves the Lark goes on to say that Nick was a killer and he would have done it eventually one day either way. He said to Gypsy when they had a daughter, he needed to take her virginity at 13. Yeah. So Nick definitely would have killed again. Or anyways. I don't know. Does anybody disagree with that? Because I don't see how anybody could. Yeah, he was arrested at McDonald's for indecent exposure. Connie says that she doesn't believe Gypsy at all. And I think a lot of people not believing Gypsy is when we look at her interrogation, she was just such a big liar. It's really hard to take anybody for their word after you see that. FarQ agrees that would have ended up jail on his own and that she's a lying manipulator. No excuses for him, but she's an unaliver, though. I agree. While Nick would have committed a murder, he would not have committed this murder if Gypsy did not give him access to her mother. You know, FarQ said that every breath she takes is a lie. I do think that Gypsy lies a lot. However, I do think we hear a lot of honesty out of her now. It's almost like she's bold when she owns that she planned the murder. You know, and you guys might disagree with me. I just think it's very bold of her the way she talks about it, just so la-di-da. You know, it happened, and I forget, you know, just like this was, you know, lifetimes ago when it wasn't even 10 years ago. Yeah, she did have a computer, and that's how she was talking to Nick and other men. Exactly. And so if you watch the prison confessions, you find out on there that her grandfather molested her. We also find out that family members seen her jump on trampolines, so they knew she could walk. They seen her eat, so they knew she didn't need a feeding tube. However, they allowed her mother, Dee Dee, to still, you know, they watched her use that feeding tube on Gypsy. They watched her not allow her to play with the other kids and sit in that wheelchair and act like she couldn't walk. So, you know, there was signs and people knew, and there was things happening. But going back to Farkey's point, there's a lot of us who's been molested. There's a lot of us who's been abused. But we did not unalive our abuser, you know? This makes it totally different. Yeah, and she had the cell phone, computer. Oh, yeah. Did you guys know that she had ran away twice and shot at her mom? I never knew that she had shot at her mom, but she did shoot at Dee Dee. That came out. I forget the specifics to it, but that blew my mind too. So, you know, it was bound to happen. And I just wonder if that came up. Well, it didn't come up at her trial because she took a plea deal, which we can get into all that. I've got some stuff pulled up here, but yeah, she actually took a plea deal. I'm going to go ahead and play some more of this.
Life have wondered, what is this like? You know, what are things that you have fascinated about trying or experiencing, knowing that for much of your life you haven't been able to do that?
You know, it's funny. I say that I'm like 16 years old again because I'm just discovering Snapchat and selfies and social media. I didn't have much of a social media presence before I got arrested either. So I'm coming into learning about all this kind of stuff. And the first TV show I watched was Obi-Wan Kenobi because I'm a huge Star Wars fan.
Are you?
So yeah, it came out last year. So I was like, oh my God, I'm dying to see this.
That was a good series.
So it was like the first thing I watched.
Okay.
You know, I'm definitely trying different foods. I'm getting acclimated to freedom. The first like 48 hours, I felt like I just wanted to do everything all at once. And I have to really pace myself.
Did you sleep much that first night out?
I didn't. It actually got released at like 3:30 in the morning. They released me a little bit different than other inmates. Usually other inmates get out at around 8 a.m. And they were very concerned about my safety because there was also a lot of media around the prison at that time. So
who picked you up?
My husband. Yeah, he picked me up, and then we drove to a hotel that we got locally. So just in case that was the way they released me, he could be there to pick me up at a short time, you know, short notice. And then we spent the night. You know, we had our first intimate moment as husband and wife. Got to consummate our marriage, which was great.
And clearly it seemed to live up to expectations.
It did.
Okay, good.
And then after that, you know, the next morning we had planned a little get together with.
For those who don't know, Gypsy had a drug problem. She would steal her mother's painkillers to get high on. So yeah, like Loves Alert said, if she could steal the medicine, why didn't she dose her mother? It's a good point.
With my family, where I just got to spend time with my dad and my stepmom and my sister, and just really enjoy some family bonding time.
Yeah. Having sex for the first time with your husband, was it everything you expected it to be? Were you nervous? Were you like, obviously you're so connected, y'all are, you know, you're married, right? But you've never got to experience a closeness like most couples. So what, you know, like how was that for the first time?
It was so sweet. And like I have a past of sexual abuse. So I was molested when I was 9 by my grandfather. And then in my relationship with Nick, there was some sexual abuse.
So in the last interview that she done on Lifetime, when it came out that she was molested, they asked the grandfather because he was part of the interview. And when they asked him, he said, no, it never happened. And then he went so far as to say that it wasn't him, it was Gypsy when she was 4 that she would try to touch his penis. So I think it's safe to say that he probably done that because innocent men just don't say that.
It was just a very toxic relationship. So coming from a place where I never had a sex life, I never felt safe. It was like being used and abused, one person after another. So with Ryan, he didn't say, "Oh, we have to have sex the first night." It was like, if you want
Yeah.
to, let it happen naturally. Because I was like trying to plan everything, and
Right.
I was so nervous. I'm like, what happens if he doesn't like the way I look, or I'm nervous
Of course,
about
it's
just being
natural.
naked too, because
Yeah.
I have scars on my body. And so in prison, it's not like he got to see me before he married me. So, they say, you gotta drink the milk before you buy the cow.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen for us. So I was extremely nervous. But then within 10 minutes, I was like, okay, this is happening. And I felt totally
one thing
comfortable
that
and
really
totally safe.
sticks out
That's
to
awesome.
me is what
I
kind of
can
message
relate
does
to you.
this
I was
send to
also
other abused
sexually
victims?
assaulted at a very young age.
Mhm.
I know how much that takes control over your life.
Mhm.
In the documentary, obviously, we saw your grandfather have
Responding to emails takes time, but not with Grammarly. In a few clicks, Grammarly's generative AI drafts
A bizarre reaction.
Mhm.
it was the disgusting reaction. When you heard that was his reaction, what was your thought?
Well, I came to a place actually before he did that interview. I had came to a place where I was going to call him and say, "I forgive you." I was
Mhm.
going to say that for me, for him, and just be done with it. And then he got interviewed, and I heard about his reaction, and I'm like, "How could you?" Like, not only are you saying that you didn't, but you're saying that I'm the one as a child at 4
years old.
I'm the one that was trying to do
You
things.
don't even know
No.
what that is at 4 years
No,
old.
absolutely
Yeah.
not. I'm not gonna get into graphic details, but it was disgusting.
Yeah.
And it left me with a lot of insecurities, and just
Oh,
I
geez.
felt
Yeah,
like I
that's who
didn't
you need to
have
be an advocate.
a healthy growth of a sexual, upbringing. So now it's kind of like I'm trying my best
To rebuild
to
that.
rebuild that
Totally.
and feel comfortable and safe within my own body.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you talk to anyone on your mom's side?
I have, my mother's side is actually they do wanna have communication with me, mostly my cousins.
Okay.
Yeah, your one
Yeah.
cousin on the documentary,
The tattoo artist.
the tattoo
Oh, yeah,
artist. I was like, I
Bobby.
kind of like this guy. He's great.
Yeah.
Do you have a relationship with him at all?
Yeah, I have a relationship with my cousin Bobby and my cousin Tiffany. They're both very close to me.
Exactly, Parky.
Actually, I have an appointment in 2 weeks to get my first tattoo,
What are you gonna
What do you
get?
and
Yeah.
Bobby's gonna be doing it.
Of course, he has to.
So I'm wanting to get a matching tattoo with my stepmom Christy. So there's this symbol, and it's called a unilome. And basically, it's a little squiggly line that basically means that the path to enlightenment and a self-awareness is mixed with twists and turns, but it doesn't make it any less beautiful.
Everything she's
And I wanna
saying
get
is
that on the
stuff
back of
that
my
came
hand.
up
Yes,
in
I
the
love
prison
that.
confession,
We
so
got
I
a
wonder
few
if
of our
she's
own.
not
Yeah.
going off that.
Watching the documentary, I was again captivated by how you spoke about prison. And when you first got to prison, I want to know, what were those first days like?
Mhm.
And then clearly you spent a lot of time in prison doing a lot of reflecting. You've
Mhm.
talked about the importance of therapy and
Mhm.
how you rely on that. And to me, it seems like there's an earnest and clear effort from you to reinvent yourself, to
Mhm.
almost reprogram, yourself. And you went all this abuse that you went through. Do you remember that moment in prison that you thought to yourself, I'm going to make the most of this? Because not
Mhm.
everyone does that.
Mhm.
We're a show that we like to talk about the fact that life is about making mistakes and
Mhm.
learning from them. Not everyone chooses to learn from their mistakes, but
Mhm.
you clearly were someone who seems like they tried to make the most
Oh
of their
no, I
time
hope
while in
that
prison. And
nobody
yeah,
drinks the Kool-Aid for
do you
sure,
remember
not
that
hers.
moment? Was there epiphany of I don't want to be this person.
Mhm.
I actually want to take accountability for the role I played
Mm-hmm.
and not let this define me.
Mhm. Actually, there was a class that I took, and it was called ICVC. And it's an acronym for Impact of Crime on Victims.
Okay.
And I took this class. It was a 12-week class, and it's all about accountability. And so, as I was going through the courses, I realized that I had made mistakes before my crime. I had made choices before my crime. Um, and I feel like even though I didn't get in trouble for those things, this was a chance and an opportunity for me to honestly learn from those things that I've done in the
Yeah, I
past.
don't think she's
So,
with her
and I
husband
completed that
either.
class and actually went back to teach the class.
Oh shit.
Yeah,
There you
and
go.
it was really enjoyable for me
Yeah, I don't trust her
to
either,
pass the
Forky.
baton
I don't
on
know
and
how
just kind
anyone
of like teach
could.
others what I have learned. It was a very impactful class for me, and I think it's sad. There are people that don't want to better themselves, but for me, it was always known. It was part of that freedom to do things with my life that I've never done before. So one of the first things I did was get into GED classes because I wanted to better my education.
I think the world has a ton of empathy for what you went through. And I think sometimes the questions people do have, a lot of people have watched the documentaries,
Mhm.
have seen the act. And I think it's those scenes at the end where you're being interrogated by the police
Mhm.
and you're lying
Mhm.
initially about
Mhm.
what happened.
Mhm.
And so much of that documentary also talks about your mother
Mhm.
and her deceit and her ability to manipulate
If she's
so
able
many
to,
people.
Forky, yes.
And
I see
kind
that
of
happening fairly
a
quick,
through
if
line
not
or a
already.
common question throughout the documentary was kind of,
And that's
how
scary.
much of Gypsy's mom is potentially still in you and with
Mhm.
what you learned and, you know, those behaviors.
Mhm.
Do you think about that? And is that something that you've actively tried to overcome?
Of course, of course. You know, I lived with her for 24 years of my life, and she did things in her life. She shoplifted. There was fraud. Like there was a lot of things, criminal activity that she was doing that I grew up in. I
Yeah.
watched her do all these things. So for me, it is a conscious effort to, go back in my mind and realize that is the wrong thing to do. This is the right way to do things. I'm reprogramming myself, and it takes a minute. I have a pretty clear knowledge of right and wrong now. The obvious stuff. But for the things that
I think this is all very dangerous. You know, I stay on the fence when I heard her prison confessions, because of after learning that she had a surgery coming up. Like, it made me realize, like, I could understand why, you know, she would feel like she has to go through the extremes to get out of that situation. However, I do not agree with the way she done it. And I think it's very dangerous because just the way she's talking and public speaking right now, saying that she's learning how to reprogram her thinking. If Gypsy can do it, why can't any other killer or someone who has, you know, been an accomplice to a murder before? Like, how is this fair and just? Yeah, she definitely wants a baby. But I'll start playing this again. I just wanted to mention that, how dangerous I think this is.
maybe aren't so clear or the lines are maybe a little blurry, I do have a
96,
wonderful
poor
dad
kid.
and a wonderful stepmom and a wonderful husband
Yeah.
that I can ask them
I've
questions
never
like,
heard
"Hey,
the
what do you
lot.
think about this?" And also I'm in therapy. So, I talk about it with my therapist. I'm very raw and honest in saying, "Hey, I know that this was not a normal childhood. Um, I'm the product of someone that was
I
very
bet you're right, Love
deceitful.
Slark.
How do I prevent
Yeah,
myself
I
from
bet you're exactly
falling
right.
prey to being like her?" I don't think I'm like my mother at all. I try actively not to be.
Quite honestly, from everything I've seen and just a little bit getting to know you, to me, it's the effort. It's the
Yeah.
awareness and the
Mhm.
acknowledgement and just the ability to recognize the challenges you face, to recognize and even admit sometimes it can be scary as a victim to acknowledge what's happened to you. So that fact that you're even doing that is, I think, inspiring, and it says a lot about the effort and progress you've made.
Grammarly now uses AI to help you write, not just revise. Type a prompt.
Yeah. Try.
Speaking of these documentaries and shows, have you watched all of them that have been out about you?
Actually, I haven't watched any of them.
Any of them?
Any of
Are
them
you
because
actively doing that, or was that just like I couldn't
no,
watch it?
no. I'm proud of the HBO doc that I did. I did an interview for that. I'm very proud of it. I'm very close with the writer and the producers and everything. I'm close with the people that we worked with it, but I'm not there yet. I lived it, so I just don't feel a need to watch all this
To
stuff.
relive it.
Right, to relive it. Like telling it and doing these interviews are hard enough. Like at the end of the day, I have like trauma. And so for me, having to do interviews is in a sense reliving it. And I can bet you that I'll have a nightmare reliving it all over again. So I don't need to watch it.
I think it's definitely different to watch people try to portray to be you and your mother, and how hard that could be to watch and be like, well, that's not how that happened. Or that, like I can't imagine having to watch that back as you. So I understand you not
Yeah.
watching that.
Yeah, she won't even watch my seasons of The Bachelor. So, you know, we can-
I get it.
that being said, have you been made aware of what's in it and whether any family members watched it, and specifically the act? Because I think there's a lot of people who know your story through that show. Are you aware of any inaccuracies that were portrayed that bothered you, or did you hear about it, or are you just kind of completely oblivious to what is in that show?
I have had my stepmom Christy. She watched it. She watched all the episodes. And she's kind of relaying what all was put in there. And there is a bunch of inaccuracies, according to her.
Okay.
So, and actually a couple of fans of the show was like, "Do you still have the hamsters?" And I'm like, "I've never owned a hamster in my life. I had cats." So
That's wrong.
That's
That was
definitely
a
wrong.
weird creative choice.
I know, I don't get it. But also the way they portrayed, one of my friends that lived in the neighborhood, Aaliyah.
Oh,
The way they
welcome to the
portrayed
world,
her
little
was, I
Florence.
guess,
That was my
more of
grandmother's
like a
name.
wild child, a rebel, delinquent or something. And she's actually a really sweet girl. And she got into nursing, so she works at a nursing home. So I think that for me, I don't care so much about the inaccuracies of that show because I'm doing this all stuff. Like I'm out now.
Right.
I have a voice now. The hardest thing was to watch everyone tell my story and get it wrong and speculate and everything. But now I'm
It's your
free.
turn.
It's my turn now.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you've been very open about
But do you
is
deserve it,
your relationship with
Gypsy?
Nick.
Mhm.
You mentioned the abuse. You mentioned just kind of, some of his dark
Mhm.
desires.
Mhm.
Something that really bothered me when I was watching the act is he comes across a little sympathetic towards the end. They
Mhm.
highlight his autism. Do you have any thoughts about that? And despite what Nick did to you and your mother,
Mhm.
do you have any empathy for him being in prison and what he has gone through?
I think that we both, like him and I, both have a lot of regrets. Obviously, I wish that this would have never happened this way. Now, for him specifically, I did my time. I know he's doing his time for his part of things.
Mhm.
I hope that whatever he does with his future, because he is spending the rest of his life in prison, I acknowledge that I am the reason for that. However, I don't feel either that it's a situation where it's a sympathetic type of situation.
Okay.
And I mean, the reason why I say that is because in my past relationships, I've had 2 relationships since I've been incarcerated. And each one of my exes and even my husband is like, "Baby, if you would have asked me that question, if you would have said, 'Hey, can you kill my mom to get me out of this situation?' They would have said, 'No. Okay, no, we're not doing
He's like,
that.
let's go to the police.
Let's go to the
Let's- yeah.
police. Okay, I'm gonna get you out of this situation, but let's go to the authorities. All right, and we're gonna do this the right way." Nick did not say that. He has these dark
Very much
fantasies. He
so.
wanted to do it. It was a fantasy he lived out, and he's paying the consequences for that. So with that being said, it's neither here nor there for, in my opinion, what I think.
She didn't even receive
It's
the
just it is what
punishment,
it
guys.
is.
Have you been able to, come to peace with that night, or have you relived that night over and over in your head? And
I still suffer from PTSD and trauma. I keep reliving this one nightmare over and over again, and it's tied to that night. It's tied to the house.
Are you able to share that?
So yeah, and I've had actually 2 nightmares that reoccur a lot. So the first one, my therapist said, is attributed to the guilt that I feel for not reaching out to other people, to help me out. So the first one that I have is I have a cell phone. I'm in my dream. I'm holding a cell phone and I'm trying to call my dad. And the number, for some reason, I can't get through to him. The number doesn't work. The phone is turned off or whatever it be. I can't get through to him. And I had that nightmare again and again and again. And then the other one is about that night, and I keep on going back into that house and just feeling very frightened. And, the murder just happens again and again and again in my mind. Like I'm free physically, but I'm not free from the trauma.
Yeah.
You obviously have.
It is hard for me to believe that she was that terrified that night. I think the only thing that she was scared of at that time was a jail cell. I mean, guys, come on. She shaved her vagina while he was killing her mom. Let's not let her fool us.
regret,
Mhm.
right? So looking back, is there something you would have done different to protect
Killed
yourself
for
and
her.
ultimately save your life?
This all started as a child, like as a toddler. So I grew up in a household where my mother said that she had magical powers and she'd put a voodoo hex on me if I ever tried to leave.
See, I believe her when she says that she didn't think there was any other way out. I believe that she was very abused, and I believe that I think that all is a shame. But anyone else who's went through abuse and has done the things that she's done are probably spending their life, if not, years in jail. They did not get no 10 years like she did and then get paroled. I'm sure there is other cases like this, but yeah.
My mother suffered from a lot of mental illness. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. So, my mom used to say that she heard voices and saw shapes and things like that. So, for me, I think the regret goes back so much further than the crime. I wish that even as a little girl, I would have maybe even said something like, "Mommy hears voices,"
And just started telling
and just started
people.
telling people,
Yeah.
some of the smaller things that was going on. Maybe even if it didn't make sense to me,
Right.
Just kind of make those comments.
Right. Why do you think you didn't? Were you just
Because my mother,
You were
she
scared.
isolated us from our family. In my younger years, it was easier. But the older that I got, the worse she got. And the smaller of a circle we had to reach out to.
Do you still?
Hey, what's up there?
Oh, I switched to H&R Block, doing my own taxes online.
I mean, despite having the regret, are you able to give yourself that grace? Because
Mhm.
you were such a young child.
Mhm.
You didn't know any better. You didn't
Yeah.
know the difference between, well, maybe voodoo's a real
Mhm.
thing, all those things. Are you still able to give yourself that grace, even though you still live with that regret?
trying. I'm trying to work on self-forgiveness. I had a conversation with my stepmom, and she was like, sweetie, people are sympathetic to you, and they're praising you not because of what you did, the crime. They are praising you, and they give you so much support because you survived it. Whereas other children and people would have died in that kind of a situation. And so I'm trying to give myself grace. I'm trying to give myself understanding. And working with a therapist, it's going to take some.
Died in one situation. Yeah, I don't agree with what she just said there, and I would have had to come back at her on that one if I was him. Let's see if he does, even though we know he won't.
Time. It's that emotional process.
Yeah, it absolutely does take some time. And
I
that was
know,
actually
Connie. I need to just
one
buy Polo
question
and
I
get
had too,
premium.
because for all the people who watch the documentaries, they've watched the shows, they've heard how your mom's family has spoken about her. I know in some other interviews you said that you don't think your mom is a monster.
No,
And
I
I think
don't.
it's admirable for you to go out of your way to have that grace for your mom because of what she did to you. That being said, you being the public figure now, I'm sure people are going to approach you. People can get kind of nervous and awkward when they meet someone they're a fan of. For all the people who have a very, very specific and very intense feeling towards your mom for what she did to you, how does that make you feel? And what would you say to someone who kind of nervously goes up to your mom and says something maybe even as crass as she deserved it?
Yeah, actually, I've gotten that a lot.
Okay.
I had that a lot of the girls in prison said, "Girl, I would have done the same thing." It makes me cringe. I hate that. And I felt so much guilt whenever I first got arrested because it spiraled so quickly. I got arrested, and then my attorney visited me, and then all of a sudden he's got a stack of paperwork on his desk talking about the Blanchard fraud scheme, and people were saying that my mother was a bad mom and things like that. And for me, I'm like, I was in a state of shock. So I was processing it all, but I felt a sense of guilt because I'm like, I'm hearing these words like your mother was a whatever. She deserved it. And I'm like, no, she didn't. I think the one thing that people think is that I hated my mom. And I'm like, no, I loved my mom. I just wanted out of that situation. I wanted out of that home.
Yeah. And I think that's something that people forget or don't know. And what I learned through the documentary is you tried to run away.
I did, yes.
Several times.
The first time was with a much older guy. And I grew up on Disney princess movies. And so I thought like the only escape I had was with a guy. So that was only my form of reference for anything. And that didn't pan out. He didn't even have a vehicle. So I was leaning on different people, just not the right people.
Yeah. You started this conversation, you were referring to other interviews, and that one interviewer just calling you a murderer.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you feel that way about yourself, or do you feel more as if that you're a survivor?
I don't associate myself as a murderer because if you think about it, yes, I had a part to play in it.
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. No, what I was saying is when she brings up the Disney stuff, it really gets under my skin, I guess, because, all right, like when I was a kid, I was really into Jean-Claude Van Damme. But if I go around drop kicking people, I'm probably going to get in some trouble. So, why does she say that? Because she can't convince me that she didn't know the difference between a Disney movie and reality.
I asked Nick for help. And how that conversation started was, he was saying that he would protect me from anyone.
I
I
agree.
said, anyone. He said, yes. I said, even my mother. He said, yes. And then the plan kind of formed from there. But he's the one that did the actual kill, not me. I can't kill anyone. That's why he's in trouble to begin with, because he's the one that did it. So when they say I'm a murderer, I don't identify as that. I'm an accessory. Absolutely. I'll take, yes, I did that. I am an accessory to murder. However, that doesn't define me. I did my sentence. I did my part, I did what the judge wanted me to do. Now that that's over, let me live my
Looks a little
life. Let me
irritated.
reinvent myself. Give me a
Absolutely.
chance.
Yeah.
Because before I didn't even have that chance to begin with. So let me show you guys who I am as a person before you just start slapping labels on me.
Now that you can finally decide who you're gonna be.
Yes.
You were held accountable. Nick was held accountable. But watching all the content, all the things that are out there, no doctors were held accountable. And it was just frustrating as a viewer to watch, whether it was the act or the documentaries, to have all these doctors, people we trust with our health. We don't know any better. How do you know?
Right.
Does that ever anger you? And do you feel like
I don't know how I feel about the doctors. I feel like there was doctors that knew what was going on and didn't do enough. But I don't know if I completely believe all of the stuff that was said by the doctors. What about you guys?
Do you feel like there are people in the medical community that should be held accountable for what happened to you?
Of course. I mean, I think that the doctors, whether or not they even suspected it in their own minds or whatever, they didn't do anything about it. So there was no report, there was no follow up. And I think that money plays a big part in it. Hey, they're getting paid. This girl needs a lot of medical care. It's more money in my pocket, right? So I think we live in a system that's very money hungry and selfish. And so if it
Wow.
cost me my
Coming from
life,
her.
what does that mean to someone else? So they aren't held accountable. And I actually, like, my parents and my dad and stepmom tried to look for an attorney that can take my case for a malpractice lawsuit. And I don't think anyone wants to touch it. Like, I've not been able to find one.
Really?
Yeah, no, that's really surprising, actually.
Maybe there's some lawyers listening to this.
Yeah, I
who-
need some legal advice.
Yeah. That seems shocking and very disappointing. Because, like I said, I mean, when we go to the doctor, we for most of us, we don't know any better. We don't know
Exactly.
anything, and whatever a doctor tells us is gospel.
Mhm.
And again, you went to the doctor more than maybe anyone ever,
Oh, yeah.
and every time you went, all these doctors were doing were just confirming.
On her last interview, the Prison Confessions, one of the doctors, an older neurologist, said that he's seen her walking. So if he was telling the truth, then he's definitely, that was malpractice. He shouldn't have kept treating her, or he should have, turned that in. Just crazy. I found that all very crazy, as many doctors as she's seen, and it still was allowed to go on.
Lie that your mother
Mhm.
was telling you, and truly couldn't imagine. I couldn't put myself in your shoes, and it angered me so much because it's such a vulnerable position to be in when we go to the doctor's office and we put our health and our lives in their trust, and you were failed time and time again.
I think that there needs to be a certain level of education about Munchausen by proxy syndrome.
Probably.
I have a friend that's in the medical field, and she told me there was
Probably
probably about
20.
a paragraph that they briefed them on. And it's something that is not talked about enough. I think when my case happened, people really started taking notice and started to pay attention to it. Because before my case, I never heard of it.
Right.
There was no TV show. There was no episodes of anything. So, now I think there's more awareness, but I still think that there just isn't enough. But, what's interesting is about 2 months ago, I had a mother reach out to me in prison. And she was telling me about how she's going through a custody battle with her ex-husband. She has a 3-year-old, and the psychologist and the therapist that they hired on the husband's, behalf to interview the mother put the diagnosis of Munchausen by proxy on her. And she's like, I would never hurt my child. My child is not even on any medications. She has tubes in her ear. That's it. And that, they're trying to take her child from her. And so there seems to be this imbalance. And I'm about to watch the documentary, Take Care of Maya.
Yeah.
I really want to watch that. So I'm going to watch that over the weekend because I
She
think
just won her case.
did she?
Yeah.
Good. Because it's so sad. There's this imbalance that is going on that either the doctors don't catch it at all, which was in my case, and then they're putting this diagnosis on people that probably don't have it. And so where is the middle ground?
Yeah, there is none.
There is none right now.
Yeah, absolutely. When was the first time that you suspected something was wrong? That you were like, this isn't right. I don't think I don't feel sick. When was that first kind of acknowledgement?
I get this question a lot.
Do you?
And there were things that I knew growing up that I didn't have wrong with me. So particularly the wheelchair. Okay, I always knew that I could walk. However, my mom instructed me to stay in the wheelchair. And so I listened. I was a very obedient child. And as for everything else, the things that is not visible, like leukemia and cancer, every time that my mom would tell me that I was going to the doctor for cancer, I thought that I was going to die. Like, I thought that I was a dying child.
Yeah.
Because cancer you can't see.
Right.
So, there was things that I learned while in jail that, oh my God, I'm not dying.
Oh my gosh.
That's amazing. I'm not already dying.
Wow.
What are your personal goals for yourself now that you're out? Like, what do you want to do? Is there a particular profession that you're interested in getting in?
Where do you want to travel?
Your social media has blown up. I mean, you're kind of the quintessential influencer in the sense that, again, so many things that you try are for the first time. And what does Gypsy love? What is she into? Have you thought about, like, what do you want to do with your life now that you're free?
How do you take 20,000 children in the middle of New York City without anybody seeing? they're being put into buses.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, I have personal goals and I have career goals. So I am, newly together, wed as my husband calls it. So, I'm married and we're starting our life together. So on the side of personal goals, we want to start a family someday. I'm 32, he's 37. We don't want to wait too long now.
Right.
So, that's on the side of personal goals. But then on the side of professional goals, it's like, okay, I have this huge platform. Let me use it for something good.
Mhm.
And so I want to get into advocacy work. I need to make connections with people that are a little bit more established because I'm just coming out of prison. So these things take time. But again, like I never expected to have such a big social media following. So I'm kind of like, okay, I'm coming out of prison. All right, this is all well and good and everything. Selfies and whatnot. Let's have fun with it for a little while. But then let's get to the serious part. Let's start using my platform for something that means something important.
Yeah. Well, you're also still allowed to have some fun too.
Yeah, of course. And look good doing it.
Have you ever thought about the fact that,
it.
like, now that you're out, even still, you don't have that kind of quote unquote normal life. Now you were abused.
I guess
then
they
you were
don't
in
teach you how to
prison,
sit in a
and
certain
now you're
prison.
an instant celebrity. Like, do you have a desire in the future? And I don't think there's any wrong answer to kind of disappear or go away, or do you don't mind embracing this public figure life that you have with the opportunity, like you said, to do advocacy, to do good, and to try to again better this world as a result of all the pain that you had to suffer, and hopefully help others not.
I've always had a very love-hate relationship with the media and the attention from all of
Well,
this.
that won't go away.
And at this point, I've come to accept it. In the past, I've hated it. I used to cry on my bed, and I'm just like, I want a normal life. It's actually, I was engaged once before. To Ken, yeah, and we were together for 2 years, and then our engagement was announced, and he's a very private person. And so he didn't like the attention. And so I attributed him breaking off the engagement and breaking my heart and devastating me to the fame. And so I definitely spiraled out of control at that time. So that made me hate it. And then seeing how I've been welcomed, that makes me at least feel more comfortable. I won't say love it, but it makes me more comfortable in being who I am.
New year, new goals, and it's never a better time to start thinking about talked about lying to Ryan about Ken. How have you guys well, now that you're married, and to the lovely Ryan who I've gotten to meet, should we bring him in here and get to know Ryan a little bit? All right, let's do it. Get in here, Ryan.
It is.
Yeah.
Have a seat.
Come sit next to me.
All right, Ryan, we have to ask you, how is your heart?
How is my heart?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Like, how is it feeling? Is it Gypsy's heart is full?
Oh, my heart is completely full.
Okay.
Like I'm amazed every day that I'm with this woman right here. Like it's been a roller coaster ride, but I'm enjoying it. I love the fact that I'm the one that's honored to be next to her.
You guys have already been through a lot. Gypsy,
He's just happy
you
she picked
in the
him. Look at
documentary,
his
again,
smile.
I'm really I love your openness. Like
Thanks.
it's for someone who's been criticized for being deceitful and a liar. I'm really inspired by what seems to me a genuine effort to try to get it right. And you talked a little bit about, lying to your stepmother. You've talked about lying to Ryan, about Ken. How have you guys continued to work through the struggles that you have had? And how has Ryan continued to be supportive
Struggles being
throughout that struggle?
Laria.
I think it's all about communication. My dad, one of the first things he said when I got engaged was, you need to have good communication or else everything's going to fall apart. So our communication skills are like on point. We're very open and honest with each other, even brutally honest. So if it's something that we don't want to hear, we're going to hear it anyway, because that's that honesty.
Yeah. How about you, Ryan? How's this been for
Now
you?
she's about to
Me
show
and
us
Gypsy decided long
picture.
ago when we got together, we just wanted to be open and honest with each other. Like she said, even if it hurts my feelings or vice versa, we wanted it to be a transparent relationship. We want this to work. It's one of those where, I have that unconditional love for her and she does too. Like she has said in the past that I love the good and the bad Gypsy. I don't, because in past relationships, people have glamorized her and, have this perception of her, of that little girl and whatever. But I just love the person Gypsy, good and bad. So it's one of those where it's great.
People have talked about, they've been critical of you guys rushing, acknowledging that, hey, Gypsy hasn't even had a normal life outside of prison. What has been the first week been like? And have there been already kind of like, oh, okay, well, this is new. I'm all right. Like, I didn't know that. But any of those moments, any of those things, you guys have had to have a moment and said, okay, this is the beginning of us learning about each other. And, quite honestly, Natalie and I still, have those moments. But what's it been like for you guys?
It's been very enjoyable. We spent a couple days at home. I don't think that there's anything that really shocked me about him, but I will say this right now. So
This is breaking news.
you know it's coming. So he's getting used to putting the toilet seat down for me because he's been living, by himself for so long. I'm like, and he's like, oh, I put it down every time. I'm like, so I found it and I found it up and I took a picture of it and I'm like, no,
as I'm
you
buying
don't.
her shoes, like as I leave to go buy her something.
I left it up the other night, buddy.
I got a picture of it. It's like, see, here's proof. And I was just like,
You're like, well, I'm
gonna take the
leaving these
shoes back
shoes.
now. Yeah, I'm gonna take the shoes back now. No, yeah, she got me on that one.
What about for you?
Rob,
Anything
you
you've learned about Gypsy
That
that's
show is
been,
being
It's been
interesting
new.
to learn?
Well,
Besides that she's not a great cook.
well, she's gonna work on that.
Yeah.
My mother has told her that she would help her. There's some things that I've learned but it's been great. Like there's not anything that I don't enjoy. It's
What's one thing you've really enjoyed that surprised you that you've learned?
well, I love
So right now we're at 53 minutes in on that. So I'm stamped 53 minutes, and you guys can go and finish that if you want. As usual, we're coming up on our hour, and my little one needs his mom. So I'm going to go be with my little one, and I'm going to do my best to come back tomorrow night. And we might finish this podcast, but if not, we're going to look through Gypsy's paperwork. Like, we're going to look back at the documents from 2015 and what the original charges was when the plea deal was presented and all those little details. So see ya, and you guys have a wonderful night.